Very good. Good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Fisher, and I'm the Deputy Manager here at Galway Technology Centre. And on behalf of the team, we are delighted to be able to share this special webinar with you guys. As many of you know, supporting scaling is one of the main drivers behind Galway Technology Centre. It has been a focus of our activity for as long as the centre has existed, and that is why we called our special anniversary event earlier this year, Scaling Our Legacy. Providing scope for more scaling is also one of the key factors behind our Academy West project that is taking place later this year, which will facilitate rapid scaling for startups and other innovation-driven enterprises. When GTC is talking about scaling, we're not just talking about focusing on what is happening locally. We also have a much more global perspective on growth and development for our member companies, which is why we thought it would be particularly useful to run this webinar this morning. We had originally hoped to run this event about 18 months ago in March 2020, but an idea that was good before the pandemic hit is still more than relevant today as we hopefully emerge from the pandemic and return to the office space. We also thought it would be an appropriate time to check the pulse of where things stand for business in the US. As a Midwest native myself, hailing originally from Milwaukee, I'm delighted that we have a strong Midwest contingent for today's event, with Bob coming from Chicago, Kevin, Ken, and Councilman Kirshner representing Mentor in Ohio. The city of Mentor is a regional economic hub just 20 minutes away from Cleveland, Ohio. It has become a leading hub for a wide range of industries and has developed a strong medtech sector. They work closely with scaling businesses, providing both matchmaking and soft landing experiences, as well as other incentives. Most may not realize this, but the connection between Mentor and Galway has already been established, as our next door neighbor here in Galway, Steris, was originally founded in Mentor. We will also hear today from Laura Miles, who is Head of Technology and IP with Flynn, one of the member companies here at the center, and she'll be able to provide some details on the legal issues to consider for any businesses looking to set up on the other side of the Atlantic. She'll be followed by Bob Rosenberg, who is an entrepreneur in residence in the Galway City Innovation District. Bob has an immense experience mentoring and working with Irish companies expanding in the US, and we are very keen to hear his perspective on the issues raised here today. But to start things off, I'm honored and delighted to welcome our distinguished delegation from Mentor. Ken Philippak has been the CEO for the city of Mentor for the last 10 years. Councilman Raymond Kirshner has served on Mentor City Council for 19 years, providing as president and mayor for spells during that time. And Kevin Melichek is Director of Economic Development and International Trade for the city of Mentor. And before that was president and CEO of the Mentor Area Chamber of Commerce. They will be telling us all about how companies can go about establishing themselves in the US and the advantages that can be provided in locations like Mentor. So welcome everyone. And just a quick housekeeping note, we will have some time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please put them into the chat feature and we'll get to them at the end of all the speakers. I will now hand it over to the Mentor delegation. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Thomas, and good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure to be here with you. And we were going to talk a little bit today about U.S. market entry and how important that is to be careful in choosing where you enter and some considerations along the way. We represent a mid-sized city in the state of Ohio. I'll talk just a little bit about that momentarily. But I think one of the questions that we were asked prior to the start of our presentation here was what the state of business is currently with respect to the pandemic. And I think it's fair to say that the United States and most states in the US is a little bit ahead of Ireland right now in terms of being open for business. I would say since about the mid to latter part of the spring, business as usual has pretty much been the status quo in the United States. Our economy is growing. It's doing well. Probably the only limitation we have of any significance right now is just getting people back to work and in some areas. But generally speaking, we're getting back to normal. We've been back to normal for quite a while now. So having said that, I'm going to talk a little bit about market entry in the United States. Why is that important to think carefully about where you locate, assuming that you made a decision to dip your foot into the US market? We'll talk a little bit about, I think, the Midwest in general. I think a lot of people, when they think about market entry in the United States, think about New York or California, or perhaps Texas, maybe Boston, because these are some of, one of the two coasts. But what we sometimes like to refer to as flyover country, because it's the area that you're seeing when you look out your plane window when you're flying between the two coasts. Some of that represents a very good value proposition for those looking to enter the United States. And Ohio in particular, we think represents perhaps one of the best value propositions. The state of Ohio has an enormous economy by itself. It's about the 7th largest in the United States per GDP, comparable to, say, Sweden in the size of its economy. If it were to stand alone, it'd be in the top 25 in the world. The state of Ohio is a manufacturing powerhouse. Number one producer of electrical equipment, number one in plastics and rubber products, top 3 in vehicle parts and fabricated metal parts. And there's about 1,400 biomedical companies in the state of Ohio. Where we are in the northeast portion, and you can see on that map, that small orange dot there represents where the city of Mentor is. Our northeast region represents about half of those biomedical companies. And in particular, there are probably 400 to 500 medical device companies working and located in the Northeast Ohio region. So that's very significant. Obviously, some of that has to do, you want to advance the slide?
Sorry.
Yeah. I think we can perhaps get past that as well. Just some major manufacturers that are listed there that are located within our borders. Steris was mentioned. Steris is the largest corporation within our border. It was started there. It began as a startup, actually, with one person. Now it employs almost 2,000 people in our community and has an international presence. One of the things that makes Northeast Ohio and the Cleveland, we're within about 15 minutes of the city of Cleveland, which is another very large, the city of Mentor, the city of Cleveland, the Northeast Ohio region kind of works together in a lot of ways. As I mentioned, there are a very, very strong biomedical cluster. We're also very strong in aviation and aerospace. It surprises a lot of people to learn that the state of Ohio is the _1 supplier to both Boeing and Airbus. So the aviation industry started in Ohio and it remains very strong there. Some of the reasons for that, I don't know, Kevin, if you want to talk a little bit about the existing linkages with.
Sure, we have, this is Kevin Malachek, the Director of Economic Development and International Trade. We obviously have several different companies from Mentor that are either potentially headquartered with a parent company, Volk Optical, for instance, Homa is their parent company in the UK. You can see some of the others that are listed on there. We have a very heavy international presence, and that's one reason that we really tried to take the initiative on this program. Not only to provide our companies here with partnership opportunities, if you want to link up with Asteris or one of the other companies that we have here at Mentor, but also provide the entrance point for companies from Ireland into the United States. We really try to adopt a concierge-based approach and an effort really to connect you with different resources, organizations, really our entire biomedical ecosystem that we have, not only within Mentor, but the entire greater Cleveland, Northeast Ohio area. And that includes resources like the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals. Cleveland Clinic has actually just broken ground on a Mentor hospital that will be finished in the next couple of years. And it has initiated a wonderful era of cooperation between us and those hospital systems, as well as our university systems that we have within the area. So there's all kinds of opportunities for you to kind of take a look at if you're looking to come to the US and how we can kind of make some of those connections for you.
Yes, at times.
As we mentioned, there are 200 institutions of higher learning in the state of Ohio, both private and public institutions that are there. Heavy emphasis on engineering, on biomedical. We have one of the top medical schools in the country at Case Western Reserve University, which is about 20 minutes down the road from where we are at this present time. Ohio also has quite a spirit of innovation. We have obviously many different research institutes that are there. Both hospital systems and Case Western Reserve University do a lot of integration with local startups and also international startups that are always interested in hearing what products are out there and how they can be helpful potentially in helping to bring those to market. That's I think something that we can provide some networking and access to.
I think that's an important point to for a number of startups and those who are trying to accelerate. These are some of the most important institutions in the United States, Cleveland Clinic being probably the among the top two outside of the Mayo Clinic hospital systems in the United States. But the point is they're very accessible. There's hundreds of millions of dollars in research and development coming out of Cleveland Clinic through its Learner Institute, Case Western Reserve University. Again, some of the top two institutions in the United States for research and development. And they have a proven track record of working very closely with local industry and even in startups on clinical trials and on giving fantastic accessibility to some of the research that's coming out of there. So these are great opportunities. You will also have NASA has an institute, a research center there, the NASA Glenn Institute. Again, very accessible to companies in the area and those looking to take advantage of their opportunities as well. We also have one of the best polymer institutes associated with Akron University. It was started by the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And again, work very closely with manufacturers and industry representatives, trying to help them find solutions to their production needs. That's that. So one of the things that I think is important is trying to establish some sort of connection to an area if you're thinking about trying to enter that U.S. market. There are a lot of things to consider, some simple, some not so simple. A lot of companies that are looking to enter the U.S. market will talk to the various states and get proposals that are incentive-based. And U.S. tax structure is very complicated. What we remind a lot of companies who are looking to invest there. The state of Ohio has, and our city has one of the lowest overall tax burden structures in the United States among the 50 states. Very important. A lot of states will offer incentive agreements and promise large sums of money, but most of these tend to be relief from a tax burden. In many cases, one state may not have that tax at all. And so it's important to weigh those things carefully. Our city, as Mr. Malachek mentioned, has what we call the soft landing type of proposal, where we will work with you to help identify resources that you will need on day one, trying to get help with immigration issues, accounting issues, banking issues, certainly location issues, to try to help you find a total package in terms of locating and helping you as much find a partner. A lot of small companies that are looking to enter the market have a lot of different ways of entry. Some of those include helping you partner up with an existing company that is maybe in terms of contract manufacturing or distribution, or some sort of exchange of technology exchange. These are all often early steps and first steps to enter the US market that are attainable for small companies versus trying to just jump in full bore and establish a US presence on one's own. So there are different ways to achieve the same goal. There are incentives available through our local community, through the state of Ohio. There are federal incentives. And one of the things that we like to do is think about taking a company by the hand and helping them navigate what, for anyone, and whether it's entering the United States, entering Ireland, if you're not familiar with these things, it can be a bit daunting. So cutting through that and having someone to help you along the way is part of what we do.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Ken. Some great stuff there, and we'll get a chance to come back to it after we hear from both Laura and Bob. So I'm going to hand you over now to Laura, who's tuning in remotely from her office, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the legal considerations that Irish companies in the early stages should be taking when they're thinking about scaling into the US. So, Laura?
Great, thank you, Thomas. Good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests and councilmen, delighted to be asked to speak to you this morning with regard to the possibility of scaling your business in the US. So I will take a moment, if I may, just to speak a little bit about our firm and how we might help you along that way as well. So we are a commercial law firm. If you wouldn't mind moving along the slides there, Thomas. We are a commercial law firm based in Dublin with offices in Galway as well. Full-scale commercial law firm, as I said, and really can deal with any aspects of commercial matters that may arise with a good client base already in the medtech space and aviation, as has been talked about earlier. And if you wouldn't mind moving on, this is just a little bit in terms of statistics about ourselves. We're very proud that we're almost nearly 20 years in business. We do have an office in the GTC here with Thomas and the team, and are delighted to service the companies here and elsewhere nationally and internationally, and would have a good history in helping clients scale their business, whether it's to the US or internationally, or indeed international clients who are wanting to establish in Ireland. And this is just a little bit more about ourselves. And on the next slide, you'll see some faces just in terms of our teams and partners within the firm. As I said, we have about, or as has been said on the slides, we have about 70 legal professionals within the firm and others, and are proud to be, what we believe to be business solutions focused for our commercial clients. And as to how this might help you and how we might help you along that path to the US, if you might move along. Sorry, no, I don't have control of the slides. For ourselves, we are the only Irish law firm who is part of the Law Exchange International. And so for us, how we would help our clients internationally and in the US is through our partners who are members also of the Law Exchange International. So this is an association of mid to large size law firms throughout the world, where we have the ability to link in with our partners to assist us and our clients who want to establish in the US in this instance, or many other countries around the world, and vice versa, obviously, if their clients wish to establish in Ireland. So for ourselves here, you can see that we have a good list of well-established law firms that we would work with quite closely, who would help our clients who want to establish in the US. For ourselves, we practice in Ireland and the UK, but where there are specific local issues or local advice required, we would work quite closely with our counterparts in Procopio or any of these other firms, Goldin Ratner in Chicago, and also Procopio do have offices in Silicon Valley as well. So they're very much, hands-on on the ground, and we can get that local advice to help our clients, consider the issues that might arise from a legal or local legal viewpoint. In terms of practically the considerations for you, I suppose for me, when I'm sitting down with a client and they're considering where or if to scale their business in the US, really it's a matter of looking at, for me, where are you now? Do you have strategic US partners already? For example, consultants, agents, where we have our business established in Ireland and we rely on or have engaged under contract the likes of agents, importers and distributors, and this business is already up and running through them, through the performance of their contract, and you control that business by the contractual terms agreed between you. So I suppose that's, you know, as part of the internal due diligence and your business planning, looking at where we are now. Do we have US partners in place? Do we have US agreements in place? And how might that impact on our decision to step into the market ourselves and that market entry? You know, we want to be careful, for example, if we already have an exclusive distributor, that we don't step in and, you know, incorporate a company and start selling in a manner which might be contrary to our agreement with our distributor. So it's very much about looking at where we are now, what contracts might we have in place already to kind of set the scene and set out our plan to scale the business in the US. If also then you decide to establish in the US, a number of things, of course, will be relevant and procedurally, as you would expect in Ireland as well. There are certain requirements to register for tax, and so you'd be required to ensure that you apply for an employer identification number, incorporate a company, and this will, you know, this may depend on your business and, you know, where you might locate, whether it's in Ohio or Delaware or other states in the US, and the type of company that you might incorporate. So these types of things would need to be looked into before you take those steps. Bank account opening, as was talked about earlier, and also the team or your people. This might, you know, impact upon your decision as to where to locate you know, your new company or your new US subsidiary. For example, Mentors has been described, seems to have a very good and strong biomedical ecosystem, and this may align with your business. And this may also have, you know, the right, or help you attract the right available talent in that area. So that might be another consideration as part of your decision to establish in the US. Also, in the context of the team, there will be certain, you know, work permits or employee visa requirements. So if you yourself are intending to move initially to the US, what requirements must be complied with in order for you to do that legally? So that all of these things can take time, not very much time. It's certainly planning, but it's important just to know, to set out the process and just to understand what's involved should you decide to incorporate in the US. From a technical or technology and IP viewpoint, if your business is, you know, it's developing IP, if you license in IP, if you're data heavy or data driven, other considerations that might arise, you know, on a high level from this viewpoint would be if you're already established in Europe, for example, perhaps you already have taken steps to, you know, pursue patent protection in the US, or to protect your brand in the US, and other intellectual property rights that you might already have established. So these would be things to look at again as part of your due diligence, in my view, just to see what type of IP do you create, what type of protection is potentially available to you, and, you know, if you haven't already applied to, you know, protect that IP where you can, is that something, you know, that we should do, and when? Always important to consider the context of ownership of IP as well, and works made for hire. So a similar legal principle would apply in Ireland and Europe. So if, for example, you already have a you know, partnership set up with some of your key you know, US collaborators or suppliers or partners in the US, and if they're engaged in maybe writing code, developing other new IP for you, if they're not employees, you know, of your company, or if they're not part of your US subsidiary, and they're engaged as a third party, they may own that IP. So we want to ensure that we build it in as what's regarded as a work made for hire, or ensuring that the IP will be owned by your company. So that will be something to square away and to ensure that you're comfortable with. If you are engaging with, you know, consultants or third parties, and there might be some overlap, there might be kind of a transition period there where you continue to work with existing suppliers or third parties as you build up your own network and your own business in the US, but something important to keep in mind from an IP ownership viewpoint. And then also just within the group generally, you know, where will the new US subsidiary sit, for example, within the group? And if it's a subsidiary of the Irish parent, for example, and the Irish parent already owns IP, how then might, you know, the US subsidiary access and lawfully use the Irish-owned IP? So there might be intragroup license agreements required, and also considerations in terms of how the US subsidiary might then license on the products or new products to new customers in the US and end users, and all of the legal considerations and contractual terms that would flow from that. So something important to consider, I think, at an early stage. Similarly, in the context of data, certainly this is obviously a hot topic. We are seeing a lot of changes in this area, particularly in relation to international data flows, from the 27th of September of this year, the new standard contractual clauses must be used for new contracts. So where EU data is going to the US, for example, we must ensure that we have this new form of standard contractual clauses in place. You know, so what we need to do, I think, is maybe take a step back and consider, right, well, if we set up a new US subsidiary and they're collecting personal data of customers or indeed new employees, will that feed back to the Irish, you know, parent company, or will any EU data go to the US subsidiary, for example, in the context maybe of support services that they might provide to customers? So we just need to map that out and understand the data flows to ensure that this is done in a lawful way. Perhaps, you know, conduct an assessment of the transfers to ensure that they're secure and ensure that there are appropriate agreements in place. This is particularly important in the context of the GDPR because of the very heavy fines that could potentially be imposed as a worst case scenario, but something also to be on perhaps on the agenda as part of your consideration when deciding to scale your business. Some key points, if I may, and this is very high level, but some key points from my viewpoint would be generally to know your market, and I expect others will speak on this, but you know, to conduct your market research and know who your competitors are in the market. It's important to consider, I suppose, the overall corporate structure and define a step plan. Now, obviously, this will be very much driven also by tax advice. In my view, in addition to the incentives that were talked about earlier, and the the gateways or potential linkages that certainly Ohio or other states may offer, for you and your business, it's important to define how this new US subsidiary might fit within your corporate structure already, and to implement that once you're comfortable with the proposed structure. Similarly, with regard to IP, it's important in my view to look at what IP do you already have. If you wanted to expand the business to the US, are your brands protected? Have patent applications been filed where they're appropriate or applicable to your business? And do we have appropriate agreements in place? In terms of intragroup licensing and that kind of thing. Where it is possible to file, if you haven't already, you may wish to do that if your budget allows. From a regulatory and compliance viewpoint, this again will depend on your business entirely. This is obviously something important to set out and define at an early stage, to make sure that you have appropriate systems and policies and procedures in place, whether it's regulatory, quality control, privacy or data protection, or ensuring that you have appropriate work visas in place for your prospective staff. So there's a lot of homework to do there in terms of your due diligence, but certainly this can be done. We have the partners there in the US that can help us from the US viewpoint, but also our colleagues and friends with us today in Mentor also have the system set up to help if you were to choose Mentor as your proposed location for incorporation. Also important from my viewpoint, obviously, are the legal agreements and making sure that we look at perhaps the agreements that you have in place. Might there be any obstacles or issues to consider in terms of termination, any conflicts, and then in your new agreements, whether it's with your customers or your suppliers, agents, and then also within the group as well, what intragroup agreements must be put in place. Again, highlighting perhaps the data transfer piece and the importance to ensure that we have compliance with data protection laws in that context. All of this, I suppose, will be subject to your budget, your timing, and to be implemented ideally with your business plan. And a couple of final important points I would highlight would be insurance, and not to forget that, and just to ensure it's on your list, and to look at your existing scope of cover. Many clients that we have would have policies in place where, for example, the geographic scope of cover excludes the US and Canada. So that's something to ensure that you or the US subsidiary as part of the group would be covered. And lastly, I suppose, always important to take tax advice, legal advice, regulatory or financial, to ensure that, your business plan is set out in detail, and that you're comfortable with the move, and that it would be implemented in the most seamless way, both from a cost viewpoint, but also with the least disruption to your existing business, if indeed you have business in the US already, and that it doesn't in any way conflict with your existing agreements with any partners you have in the US. So that's a very high level kind of run through of the considerations from my viewpoint, some of the key questions we would be asking, and the starting point for us. Of course, happy to take questions later. This is just a short summary of our practice areas. We'd be glad to assist you in your business as you may scale into the US, working with our partners and indeed our friends and colleagues here from Mentor Ohio today. Thanks, Thomas. And that's me.
No. Apologies, Laura, for leaving that gap there. I'm just trying to get the camera back going, but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very enlightening. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to hand you over to Bob Rosenberg, the entrepreneur in residence at the Galway City Innovation District, and he's going to do a bit of talk on a few points that have been covered, and we'll talk a little bit more beyond that. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I'm pleased to be here at GTC. I work with half a dozen companies here, and this feels like home. Thomas and Noreen are always supportive of what we're trying to do, and as well as supportive of events like this. And I want to thank the folks from Ohio for making this necessary. They're part of the larger solution in what I'm going to be discussing today, which is the collaboration of hubs, which is a relatively new feature, at least over the last few years in the startup world. Today, I get to take a look from the Irish perspective, since I've been here now for almost 5 years, at what's happening in the marketplace and what are the implications for Irish companies. About 2 years ago, I started looking at some of the data coming in, and I think it's a good time after a year and a half of COVID to see where we're at and see a fundamentally different marketplace, which I think is good news for Irish startup companies. The big change is 5 years ago when I first started teaching at NUIG, the difference in valuation in companies, US to Ireland or US to EU, was about 2 to 1. So it was my belief that like other places in the world, there was an arbitrage opportunity. There was an opportunity for investors to come in and make a more liquid market here. The market was very tight in terms of funding, and that arbitrage would be eaten up by market liquidity and new opportunities. Owing to several factors, the opposite has happened. With the onset of COVID, the investment market in the EU has dried up. VCs in the EU have been pushing down valuations, which is bad news for startups. On the other hand, venture capital is going from strength to strength in the United States, and especially with the start of COVID, middle of COVID, the Fed started injecting about $180 billion a day into the marketplace. the United States is awash with cash right now. And there's very few places to invest with interest rates as low as they are. So venture capitalists have huge amounts of dry powder right now, which have flipped the marketplace for the first time in the history of venture capital. What does that mean? It means that rather than money being a short commodity in the business, good deals are the short commodity in the business. So you're seeing large established venture capital funds setting up, rather than just investing in late stage deals, they're setting up facilities and new funds to invest in the very earliest stages, sometimes pre-A. You're seeing angel funds investing lots more money than they used to, as well as investing in A rounds, which is not usually the case for angel groups. And you're seeing a competition for the best deals. You're seeing valuations going up because venture capital funds are having to fight to get into the best deals as early as possible. If you look at the raw numbers today, the US to EU ratio in terms of A round post-money valuation is about 5-1, sometimes 6-1. If you take out the outliers, it's more like 4-1. But even so, at that level, startups in the EU are a huge bargain. Also, these startups are enormously capital efficient because the government has provided soft money financing. So good startups ready for A-round funding are in a very attractive position. The challenge is getting across the Atlantic. And Laura and the mentor folks have talked about how we can soften that transition, because the success rate for Irish companies and EU companies setting up in the US isn't so good. So we've got to improve that. And starting about 18 months ago, I began working with startup hubs in the United States, because startup hubs have started to collaborate and work together to take advantage of the opportunity where they have a startup company domiciled in their hub. Going to VCs is something they can trade on. So they've been very responsive. The other piece of the puzzle is that we've seen a large number of small, aggressive, multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-sexual venture capital funds starting up who are part of this collaboration, who are working with the hubs, and who are seeking out deals to provide a fundamentally different flavor on venture capital. Some of the structures, some of the investment policies are significantly different than the traditional Silicon Valley style funds. So I've been working with 6 companies over the last 12 months. They are ready for A-round funding. They have products on market or products that are waiting for CA and FDA clearance to come to market, and looking at getting them across the Atlantic. One of these companies happens to be here in PTC. COVID hasn't helped us, it's delayed things, but the hubs in the States, as well as several of the young VC funds and a couple of angel funds, have been extremely helpful. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to set up strong consulting relationships with hubs and VCs in the States, so that as soon as COVID lifts to the extent possible, they can move into the States and execute a successful A-round funding at valuations that would be considerably more attractive than those currently available in the EU. A couple of those companies are med tech companies. We're very excited about the opportunities. And I think the goal is to use Ireland, especially because of the lack of language problems, to then start a pipeline of high quality companies ready for A-round funding and fundamentally change the liquidity game in Europe and the current challenges that we face. So I'm pleased to be here. I'm pleased we're having these conversations and look forward to taking best advantage of our new contacts and friends. Thomas, thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Bob. And thank you to both Bob, Laura, Kevin, and Ken for their enlightening information. I think we've gotten a few good talking points to bring to the table. As Kevin and Ken mentioned at the beginning, the pandemic did set things back, but businesses open in the US and, it should be full steam forward in that regard. Bob, just mentioning there that the challenges of getting over the Atlantic is something that associates like the delegate from Mentor are there to help with that soft landing process. And then we have, the legal expertise of Laura, who highlights some of the important points that Irish companies need to be taking as they begin to make that journey. So it's all there, and so we'll take this chance. If anyone does have any questions, please be sure to put them into the chat box, and we'll voice them out here with our panelists. We had a few come in beforehand, so I might just kick it off, and I go back to Kevin and Ken. Just with regards to, you spoke about the opening after the pandemic, and I mean, let's get that one off the table. First and foremost, just we obviously have to touch on the pandemic, but how has business? You might just expand on that piece there for us.
Sure. I would say, obviously, at the very outset of the pandemic, from March till probably about May, June, we saw quite a slowdown, as everybody did. But obviously, the United States did deal with the pandemic a little bit differently than other countries around, for better or worse, in that situation. And after that time, and especially as we proceeded late into 2020, talking with lots of our companies, they rebounded quickly. We had obviously some momentary layoffs, we had some momentary shutdowns, but our manufacturing sectors were allowed to continue functioning at full capacity as essential businesses. So many of our manufacturers actually had record years in 2020, and that has continued into 2021. So while we had some momentary setbacks, in general, things have picked up quite a bit. We have had some challenges with workforce, which I know is prevalent in Ireland and also in the UK, which means we've had, just kind of getting people back to work and that type of thing. But in general, otherwise, the work is available and companies are doing actually quite well.
Would add one point to that too. There's been an interesting I'll call it a phenomenon, but I think what the pandemic has taught a lot of the manufacturers, in particular in the United States, and we're finding that that's the case too in some of the European trade partners as well, is that the reliability and it can't necessarily be guaranteed in terms of suppliers and that. In particular, places like China, where we've become reliant, you're seeing a lot more reshoring happening right now, which is leading to some reinvestment, not just looking for new suppliers, but also being a lot more careful about more trusted trade partners. So we're seeing an influx of interest in doing business in the United States, perhaps a little bit more expensive than maybe suppliers in some other parts of the world, but especially with respect to the problems and the extraordinarily escalating costs with shipping, places like Europe and the United States are becoming much more available and much more looked after in terms of those supplier issues.
Thank you. Very enlightening. And to stick with the Mentor delegation, another question that had come through is, and it's a point that you spoke to, Bob, you spoke to, and Laura as well, the importance of the soft landing and the services that you guys provide to Irish companies when they're coming over. So Can you maybe just expand upon that piece a little bit as well? And also just say to talk to maybe the best way to engage with yourselves, and at what point in the journey would they be reaching out to yourselves?
I'm going to have you answer that question, Kevin. I just want to add one thing to that prior to that again, because I had mentioned at the start of our presentation, the importance of picking your location. But when you talk about some of the soft landing things that a city like Mentor can offer, it also starts with the idea that the cost of doing business there is so much lower to begin with. So, we talked about things like tax structure and that, but just the cost of living overall. So if you're looking to do business in New York or California, you might be looking at wage costs that are 40% lower, capital costs that are significantly lower. So those things are all important before you even start to talk about the concierge type of details that we might offer, which Kevin will speak to.
So we obviously talk with everybody about their specific needs and interests. We want to kind of interview you. You can ask us what you're looking for. Some people are just looking to set up obviously some type of sales office. Some people want to start obviously looking for manufacturing options or contracting with manufacturing, and us trying to find some legitimate partners for them. It obviously all takes a variety of areas. We engage with dialogue via email, via Teams, Zoom calls, what have you. As far as it goes. And we also would obviously like people to come over and visit. We do regular inbound missions. We've done obviously virtual missions the last 2 years. We're probably doing another one of those sometime in the first quarter of 2022. But it is our hope next year to actually bring companies over. We do know that there is obviously some funding available for companies to come over from local LEOs. To defray some of those costs as well. We're looking probably to host a more formal delegation visit in September. We'll do one-off visits as well. We really try to tailor this to specific company needs in terms of what you need. So having that direct dialogue with myself, with my staff, with Mr. Flipback, whoever you'd like to chat with, is one thing that we really do to try to make sure the soft landing protocol is something we can kind of tailor to every business. That's why we call this a concierge-based approach to making sure that we can try to accommodate your needs.
An example of that might be if you're interested in doing business with, say, the Cleveland Clinic hospital system. We have arranged for businesses to get in-person meetings in a situation like that. We've had, as part of our virtual and live inbound trips, we've had persons from institutions like the clinic come and talk about how one gets into that stream of commerce with that system, how one takes advantage of clinical trials, and things of that nature. And B2B business meetings if you're looking for a business partner.
Thank you, Kevin and Ken. That brings up you brought up a good point there as well, and it's the question of treating the U.S. as one giant market. Which Laura, you brought up this point that's not the right way to go. And Bob, you might maybe elaborate on this point as well. It's for an Irish company who's looking to the U.S., the importance of looking in the right location. As we heard, Mentor has a strong med tech sector. They have biomedical, but not every company is going to be in that sphere. But the market research is quite an important piece. So, Bob, you might just speak a little bit to that point.
Yeah, I think the market research is important. I'm a big believer in market research, but I think that Laura brings up the critical issues, and I think that finding hubs that can provide a nest for companies is critical at the outset. Laura did a very good job of talking about the transition and the phases and the sort of checklists that go along with those transitions. And it seems to me that a company looks to take a year or even 2 years to get its feet in the United States, and a real chance to look around. Now, if you're a med tech or a manufacturing company, there certainly will be ways of filtering the hubs and the locales. But I think that for a lot of companies, getting into the States, getting comfortable and learning that marketplace, even as much as learning how to pitch to VCs, which is quite different in the States than it is here, or learning how to pitch business. Leaning in for Irish companies is not always easy in the rough and tumble of the United States. I think a lot of companies can make that successful transition, or at least more companies than have done so in the past, and then have an opportunity to sit up and look around and say, am I better off on the left coast? Am I better off in Austin, Texas? Am I better off in a city that has inexpensive airfares or international flights? So it's a business to business thing. And I don't think that when you commit to being in one location in the States, you're absolutely committing yourself to staying there. So I think getting across, doing your due diligence and doing the checklist Laura has provided, and getting yourself set up with it, with the employment laws, with the tax laws, with the incorporation laws, really give you an opportunity to then say, okay, I'm in a marketplace where I have lots of value as a startup and as a company that can create economic value. Where is the best place for me that includes state or local incentives, as well as the other types of infrastructure that you're going to need to grow your business?
Thank you, Bob. And Laura, I can see you agreeing quite a bit with what Bob was saying there. So if you have anything to build on that, and also maybe touch on the fact that if, thinking of the time frame of when, some of the companies might be ready to jump on the boat and make their way over now. Some might be even earlier in the startup phase. So maybe talk about, the time frame that companies should consider when they are. I know Bob mentioned a year or two. It can be a long, drawn-out process when you're looking at the legal considerations. Maybe touch on that as well.
Sure, absolutely. And I would echo what Bob has said, and agree absolutely. All of those commercial points are important in terms of deciding which state is the right state for you in your business. I would also say that there are, as everyone will know, there are 50 states in the US. Each have their own state laws as well as federal laws. And there are also additional, tax considerations. So it's important to find the right fit, as well as, as has been mentioned, all of the other incentives, the team, the people, and all these other things that will be important and impact upon your decision. The timing will depend on your business, the nature of your business, really. But I would say that if you are considering scaling your business, that you should, start at the earliest possible opportunity and allow as much time as you can to ensure that enough time is afforded to take this decision and make this decision in an informed way, ensuring that you have all of the information required, a good understanding in terms of the local supports that are available, the incentives, grants that might be available to your business, as well as, the people, the surroundings, the hubs like in Mentor or other parts of the US. From my viewpoint, obviously, I will also be looking at where, for example, clients have some business already established in the US where we might have a reseller in terms of our software, for example, or we have distributors in terms of our medical devices or our other products. We would need to look at the contracts and what do the existing contracts actually say. If, for example, we want to terminate, or if we want to, to collaborate on the market together, revisit the agreement, and what are the actual notice periods required. So it will depend entirely, I think, on your business, your contracts that you may have in place, and any regulatory requirements or the lead-in time you might need to facilitate any permits, license approvals, or anything like this that you might need to undertake for your business. But I agree, this is not something that can be done in a rushed way. I would certainly urge that advice is taken. Tax advice especially will be important, as well as legal, financial, regulatory, and just speaking, visiting, as was said, and getting the lay of the land, understanding the culture. Is this the right fit for your business? But in terms of timing, I can't say specific amount of time. For example, incorporating a company is relatively quick, but a lot of homework needs to be done to determine where to incorporate. So it's allowing that time to make sure that informed and the right decision is made for your business.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. I'm conscious of our time, and I just want to open up to any of the speakers if there's any final points that anybody wanted to make. Laura? No, everyone seems happy enough. I appreciate that for everyone who joined us. As we hope this webinar has shown, while there are some hoops to jump through, there are certainly fantastic scaling opportunities available for the US, in the US, for Irish businesses. And once you take the time to do your due diligence and select where you'll be headed over to the States. Helping our member companies and those within the regional ecosystem to scale is the key focus for everyone here at GTC. It is one of our primary purposes. And we are available to talk to any of the companies who want to talk about their scaling needs, both domestically and internationally. If anyone is looking to make contact with any of the speakers today, please reach out to Noreen Conway or myself. Our details, we're going to put them into the chat box there now. Plus, we're also going to send a follow-up email to all the registered attendees, so you'll get the details of the speakers today after the event. So if you want to reach out directly, you can do that as well. So our thanks again to our fantastic speakers. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. Please stay tuned to Galway Technology Centre for more upcoming webinars of interest in the coming weeks. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we hope you have a good rest of your morning and day. So goodbye for now. Thank you.